budget had a big impact and a difficult impact from a Labour Party and trade union movement point of view, because it really revealed to people the scale of the impact of the global economic crisis. But I think it also did something else which is very important we get across in our communications to members and to the public in general campaigning, because it did set out very starkly three very big differences now between the position of the Labour government and the position of the Conservative opposition. We've been through a period of time when the Tories have been essentially following a policy of hug Labour, be as close as they could be to us, point out a few things they disagreed with, but basically saying, well, you get all the things you like about Labour with us, you don't get things you don't like. The response to the global economic crisis has actually opened up a huge gulf between the parties, which if we can get that across clearly and make it clear what the differences are, that actually gives an opportunity to differentiate ourselves better. There are really three fundamental issues about where we are that came across. The first is a very simple one of what's the problem. The Tories want to define this as a British economic problem created in Britain by mistakes made by a British government with an impact in Britain that is totally different to anywhere else in the world. And the whole way that Cameron responded to the budget was in those sorts of terms. Our view and our understanding is quite different. This is the first time since the Second World War that the whole world has been in recession at the same time. This is a global problem, the problem in the financial system which quickly, much quicker than anybody expected, infected the real world economy, is right round the world. And the experience here, despite what you might read, is broadly similar to every other country like ours around the world. Everybody is seeing big deficits. Everybody is seeing tax revenues collapse. The details are different. I mean, here we've been hit particularly hard by banking and housing, but in Japan, for example, their exports are down 45%. In Germany, they're down 25%. So those economies have been hit in different ways. Our exports have suffered far less than that, as it happens over this period of time. So everybody's running big deficits, and everybody is having to borrow. We actually started the downturn with the second lowest level of debt anywhere in the G7, and all the projections suggest that when this is over, we will be an average borrower in the G7, not a top borrower in the G7. So this idea that we are uniquely facing some collapse in our economy, uniquely facing some difficulties with borrowing, is simply wrong. So the first big gulf between the parties is understand the difference. The second is the response. Our view, very clearly, is at a time when the private sector economy around the world is in deep difficulty, is the time where the public sector has to step forward and put money into the economy. And that if you were to cut, as the Tories propose, public spending now, or to cut borrowing now, it would have two or three major impacts. The first is it would hit loads and loads of people. So the things that we've been able to do in the last few months, the cuts in VAT, the cuts in income tax, the increase in pensioner payments, the increase in the full pension from April, those things that we have done to make a difference, those would have to go. The measures that we've put in place to increase support for people who lose their jobs through skill training, through new job opportunities, the new guarantee that we're bringing this year to make sure we don't have long-term youth unemployment again, those things would have to go. So if you took the Tory recipe, there'd be a huge impact on lives of ordinary people at the moment. Our ability to try and protect people through the recession would be hit. The second thing, though, that would happen is by taking the money out of the economy that we put in through the so-called fiscal stimulus, it would actually hit business and employers right across the economy. So it would deepen recession. it would increase unemployment. I mean, the general estimate is that the measures we have taken so far is sustaining about 500,000 more jobs in the economy than would be the case if we hadn't taken those measures. So it would deepen the recession. And because it would deepen the recession, it would slow recovery, and we would end up paying more in the long run. So there's a big difference to us about how you respond. They say get borrowing down, get public spending down, do it now, and that would make things worse, not better. So that's the second thing we've got to get across. The third difference is, what else do you do, if anything at all? If you listen to the Tories, they are very clear that what you do is you cut spending and you cut borrowing, and that's it. We're very clear that if we're going to move away from an economy which frankly was over-dependent on the finance sector, over-dependent on the city, towards an economy that's better balanced, which is more equitable, has strengths in advanced manufacturing, in bioscience, in the digital economy, the industries that will lead the world in the future, it won't just happen. We have to invest in them to make it happen. And the budget sets aside money, some of us would have liked more, but there you go, for investment in those areas. So a real serious investment in renewable energy. A real serious investment in things like carbon capture and storage, which has got to be part of the solution to global warming. The ability to invest in the bioscience industry and low carbon manufacturing. So the third difference between us is we think you actually have to positively go out and plan to invest in the new growth areas of the economy, and the Tories don't. Now these are very difficult times for all sorts of reasons for the party at the moment, but actually that gives a clearer choice between the political parties for many people than we've had before. If we followed their recipe, we'd make the recession worse, recovery would be slower, we wouldn't be able to protect people, and it would cost us more in the long run, and we wouldn't be able to build the economy of the future. And that's, in fact, the central big messages I think we've got to come out from the budget. We've also got to, and I won't go into too much detail about it, just remind people of the things that we have done that wouldn't happen if the Tories were in place. Everyone remembers, or most people above a certain age at least, remember what happened in the late 80s and early 90s, when not only did unemployment go up to 3 million, but the government took no action at all to protect people from that. And we know in a city like this, in Portsmouth, across Hampshire, there were people who were out of work for months, they got tipped onto incapacity benefit, and still some of them never got back into work again. There were 400,000 young people who were out of work for more than a year, and no serious measures were put in place to stop youth unemployment at that time. There are actually, by comparison, 61,000 young people who have been out of work for more than a year at the moment. The sorts of measures we put in place, like the new jobs fund and the guarantee to young people, if they've been out of work for 12 months, they get a job or they get training, is a huge difference with what the Tories did last time around. And we've got to say to people, we will not abandon people the way the Tories abandoned people last time. The second difference is that we all remember how many people lost their homes. And we're in serious danger of losing their homes in the late 80s, early 90s. And again, the Tories did nothing at all about that. Now, the situation is different today to some extent, because then we had 15% interest rates. Now we've got very, very low interest rates. So it won't be as bad. But at least we have also put measures in place to stop people who lose their jobs, where there's one person working and the other one loses their jobs, losing their home. That's another big difference. So we've got to really drive up the differences between the political parties. Now I'm going to stop now because the fire alarm is about to go.